the Gothic. We're going to have a bit of an introduction, and then we're going to go into the pieces, like always. Now, the pieces, I don't have the notes written out for you. You are going to have to do a deep dive into some articles and watch a couple videos to get those notes for those pieces. So again, we're going to be looking for form, function, content, and context. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Here's the video list, and again, I'll link these down below for you, for your convenience, and the article list. Again, I'll link this all for you. The theme for the Gothic period is Lux Nova, new light in Latin. Lux Nova, go ahead and write that in your notebook at the front of the book. And yeah, I'm so excited. I love the Gothic. This is one of my favorite lectures. And unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to look strange this year because we're not face-to-face. We normally do a couple activities that help to reinforce some concepts that we're just not going to be able to do this year. So I apologize for that. Okay, so the Gothic is the tail end. It's the ending, the culmination of the medieval period. And the term Gothic was not used by the people living in this time period. So it looks like this time period. It's for 1140-ish to 1500-ish. And again, it changes from region to region. Some people are still experiencing the Romanesque, and some people are experiencing the Renaissance. So roughly, again, these are our dates. Now, in the Renaissance, they're looking back to Greece and Rome, and they're looking back and thinking that this is the pinnacle of human achievement, and they're doing their damnedest to reinvent, to revisit the Greeks and the Romans. They're going to look therefore back at what just happened and say, oh, ooh, this is not classical. This is not Greek. This is not Roman. Ooh, it looks like a bunch of barbarians made it, like a bunch of Goths made this. Ergo, Gothic. Okay, so you'll find that a lot of terms for movements moving forward in Western art from henceforth is going to be applied later and derisively. It's meant to make fun of that movement. Okay? And then the name just sticks, which is what we get. So he's Giorgio Vasari, who's the father of art history. He's going to look back. He's going to be writing about the magnificent Greco-Roman new stuff that they're making in the style of the Greeks and the Romans. And he's going to look back at this time period here at the tail end of the medieval period and say, oh, that looks like a bunch of barbarians made it. Gothic. Okay? What life was like during the Gothic era. Gothic life was hard. It was extremely difficult. We've got the 100 Years' War between England and France and their allies. We've got the schism in the Catholic Church, the Great Schism, where you have two different men saying that they're the Pope, claiming to be the Pope. The Pope gets kicked out of Rome and then goes back to Rome, but then it's the big mess with the Catholic Church. And you've also got the plague happening, the Black Death, which is now very apropos. So you've got all this stuff happening in the Gothic era, and so life is not pretty. Life in the Gothic era is hard, and so the art is going to reflect that. And it's going to appeal to the heart. It's going to appeal to the emotions. They feel they have these terrible lives, and the art is going to show that, this depth of feeling. Cities are going to, so previously in the early part of the medieval period, we've got the center of learning are going to be in monasteries. Those are the guys that are going to be making the books and just kind of recopying things as, they're the only people that know how to write. Now, intellectual life is going to start to shift into cities, and nation states are going to start to coalesce and get bigger. So we're going to be seeing France. We're going to be seeing England. We're going to be seeing, these entities exist as nations right now. Okay, the Catholic Church is at the height of its power. That needs to be known as well. So for an overview of Gothic architecture, go ahead and give this a watch. It's the first video linked down below. Now, what makes the Gothic Gothic? How is it different than anything else that's ever happened before or since? Okay. Now, the idea of Gothic art is height. They're going to try to make their buildings as tall as they humanly can, which is very appropriate because this is the era right now, up until now, the tallest building on the planet was the Great Pyramid at Giza. This is the moment when we finally surpass that achievement. Okay, it's the Salisbury Cathedral in England. And we get there using some architectural tricks. Now, the pointed arch is our first trick. It channels the weight differently than a rounded arch, so it allows you to go taller. And they picked this up when they did the Crusades, because this is a staple of Islamic architecture. And so they're going to steal that pointed arch and bring it back to Europe, which allows them, they're going to notice it allows you to build taller because it channels the weight differently. And so it allows the building to go taller. We're also going to be using rib vaults. Okay. Now the rib vault, it looks like a groin vault with just some decoration. True. But it's completely different. What's happening here in a groin vault, all the weight is carried on the whole thing. The whole thing is holding up all of its own weight. A rib vault is like an umbrella, where you have the ribs, and those are holding all the weight. And then this, in here, in the vaulting area, that's just decorative, okay? That's not holding any of the weight. So it allows you to go taller because it weighs a lot less. So it's, again, like I said, like an umbrella. The strength of the umbrella comes from the metal frame. The strength of the rib vault comes from the stone ribs, okay? And then everything else is just thin, so we can go taller. Also, the flying buttress. Now, an attached buttress lets you go bigger. Because again, think about Legos or a marker tower when when you're a kid and you take all the markers and you stack them up and you can only go so high before it falls over. A buttress allows you, it widens the width of the wall and allows you to, it helps hold it up. Well, a flying buttress, they take that buttress, that tower of stone, and they move it away from the building and connect it with an arch. And that helps them to, again, go taller. Okay. And then lastly, this doesn't help with the height, but it's just a hallmark of Gothic architecture, is the rose window. Okay. It's a little round window at the front of the church. Now, these are the hallmarks of a Gothic building. So you're going to want to, again, these are your flashcards, your architectural flashcards for the Gothic. Okay. So go ahead and make these: pointed arches, rib vault, flying buttress, rose window. All right. All of these serve to make this possible, that sweet, sweet stained glass. Here we're going to get, this is the crowning achievement of Gothic architecture, when we finally get stained glass. And it is so magical. Okay. We'll talk about stained glass here and what it does in just a moment. So a cutaway of a Gothic cathedral. Here we go. So we've got the nave, we've got the side aisles, we've got the flying buttresses, we've got the rib vaults. Again, the rib vaults are not rounded. They are pointed. Check out that pointed arch that they're using. Pointed arch, pointed arch, pointed arch. Okay, clerestory windows. Again, the point is to make it the walls tall and thin, and as we want as big of windows as we can get. And that's the whole point of this whole endeavor. Okay. On the outside, you're also going to be getting these things. These are called pinnacles, okay, little spires, and that's another hallmark of Gothic architecture. So here's another cutaway of a Gothic church. We've got our flying buttress with the pinnacles, our rib vault ceiling, our clerestory. Now, in the Romanesque, this portion in between the arcade, again, nave, side aisle, arcade, in between the arcade and the clerestory, in the the Romanesque, this was the gallery, and you could walk up there. And early Gothic buildings are still going to have a gallery, but they're later going to get rid of that and just make it this just pretty decorative stone, and it's called the triforium. The Gothic begins with a monk, and his name is the Abbot Suger, and it looks like sugar, Suger, but it's Suger. And he's going to redesign the church of Saint Denis. That is the burial place for the kings of France. And the thinkology that he's going to apply to it is this concept of lux nova, new light. What he's going to say is that the light influences the feelings and the experience of the people who see it. That they're going to see this colored light, and it's going to change their mood, and it's going to allow them to experience the divine. That through matter, we will be able to experience the immaterial. That we'll be able to touch the face of God by feeling the warmth of this colored light. And so they change the way that they build buildings so that we can make the walls taller and thinner, so that we can have bigger and bigger and bigger windows to fill them with this stained glass, this new light. Just remarkable. So this is the Church of Saint Denis, and you can see that it has these Romanesque arches, okay? And the windows aren't very big, okay? Look at that rose window up front. It's very, very small. This is the first Gothic building. So it's not going to be later, when we get to the late Gothic, the stone walls are going to completely disappear, and it's just going to be just barely enough stone to hold the whole thing together, and it's just going to be glass when we get to Sainte-Chapelle. And I can't even tell you what that experience is like. And if you've ever experienced stained glass, you know what I'm talking about, where you walk in and it's electrifying, and it's powerful, and it's divine. And that's what he was trying to tap into. So he wants you to walk into a space, Abbot Suger, he wants you to walk into this space and immediately be transported to the heavenly realm. He wants you to be overcome with emotion. He wants you to feel the presence of God. So Gothic is a very emotional style. Okay. The dull mind rises to truth through that which is material. That's what he says. So we're going to, through matter, we can touch the divine. And a beautiful sentiment. Okay. So other theologians are going to have a problem, because he wants to make churches as beautiful as he can. Because again, he wants you to have this experience of the divine. And if you've ever walked into a Gothic cathedral, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been to St. Patrick's in New York City, and it instantly you just, because it's so tall, it makes you go like this. And you're looking up at the sky, and all of a sudden, who lives in the sky? God. And that's the point. And you're feeling the light, and it's just magical. And so he's going to say, that we want to make churches as beautiful as humanly possible, because we want to have this otherworldly experience. And other theologians at the time are going to say, no, this is counterintuitive. This is not what God wants. And Christ wanted us to be poor and humble. But he's like, nah. Abbot Suger's like, nah, that the material takes us to the immaterial. that people aren't going to get lost in the idolatry of it. Rather, they're going to feel this, and it's going to change them and take them to the presence of God. Okay? I want to talk about Notre Dame. It's not on our list, but I do want to talk about it because it is the typical Gothic cathedral, where we have the three-part entrance, where we have our portal. Now look at the portal, see how it's changed? And the archivolts, they're pointed arches with the tympanum, the trumeau, the jambs. Oh, look, on the jambs of Notre Dame, there are statues attached. We've got the rose window. Now let me say this about the rose window. The rose window is a reference to Mary. All right. And she is often, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is often going to be depicted in the center pane of glass here, right here. That's usually going to be Mary, because the rose window refers to Mary, because she is the rose without thorns. She was born without original sin. She conceived Christ without sin, that she was overpowered by the Holy Spirit and conceived the Son of God purely. Okay. She's the rose without thorns. And so within art, within architecture, you're going to see roses, especially in Christian art. You're going to see roses when you see Mary, because she's the rose without thorns. So the rose window is absolutely a reference to her. And later, when we see pictures and paintings of Mary, you're going to see that she's often depicted in a rose garden, especially when Gabriel shows up to her, that she's in a rose garden. She's enclosed in this rose garden, that again, she's sinless. She's shut off from the world and sinless, and these flowers have no thorns, and she has no sin. Okay. We have the King's Gallery here, the Kings of France, and Old Testament. We've got Mary, a statue of Mary just outside the rose window. We've got the bell towers where our hunchbacks live, JK, and we've got gargoyles. We can see pinnacles. Okay. I got to visit Notre Dame, and it was one of the most transcendent experiences of my life. Our tour guide when we were there was like, we're like, hey, what about Notre? Because really, the tour guide was like, and there's Notre Dame, and we're going to keep going. And my friend that I was with, and that's Senor Wells, if you know who he is, and that's him right there. Senor Wells knew that I really wanted to see this. This is one of the highlights, the things that I wanted to see. And he was like, no, we need to go inside. And the tour guide was like, whatever, fine. I'm going to wait out here, because I've been, she'd been in this cathedral hundreds of times. It was one of the most transcendent things that I've ever experienced. So here's a rose window I was standing in at the crossing, and this is the end of the transept. Okay, so here I am again in the crossing. Here's the back of the apses. If you keep walking, it's the apse, and here is the crossing, and the transept is over here. Here's my wife and I, and we're standing outside. It was a rainy day, and you can see the rib vaults. You can see the stained glass. You can see, now Notre Dame does have a gallery here. This isn't, you can walk up here. We did not, but you can. Again, transcendent. Down here, that's a statue of Joan of Arc. So cool. There she is. There's Joan of Arc. And when you're standing next to it, it feels like it is made out of sugar. Like it's not even real. Like it's ethereal. Like it's this, wow. And to walk in and to lay your hand on a column that's been there for 800 years, and to know the faith that was put into that building. Now, down the back, down the apse, there is this scene in gold, this bas-relief in gold, that tells the story of the life of Christ. And on the other side, it's the life of Mary. And so I got to see that too. Very, very cool. go ahead and watch this clip. This is just for pure enjoyment. This is from Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. But I want you to watch it and just like see the parts of the cathedral and see if you can name them. The transept, the crossing, the rose window, she does walk past this at one moment, which is really cool to see. And go ahead and see if you can identify the parts of the cathedral in this clip from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Very, very, very cool. And they've rendered it extremely accurately and extremely well. So it's worth, like, the side aisles, the nave. You can name the parts when Quasimodo's like watching her from the gallery. It's so cool. So go ahead and give this a watch. And then there was that moment when Notre Dame burned down, and the roof, because above the rib vaults were these beams that were 800, these wooden beams that were 800 years old, and they were renovating it, and there was an electrical problem, a spark, caught fire. And I remember, hearing that Notre Dame was on fire. And I Googled it, and I walked across, and I saw it, and there it was in real time, burning. And I walked across the hall to the other art teachers, and it's like, you gotta see this. And we just broke down crying, all of us. Gosh. I just don't even have any words. When the tower fell. So they are currently restoring it. They're not sure yet, as of November 2020, what they're going to do with the tower, the crossing tower. The crossing tower isn't original. It was put up in I believe the 18th or 19th century. So it's not original to the building. But so there's still debate as of the recording of this video, like what they're going to do, if they're going to restore it as it was, or if they're going to do something new. So go ahead, if you want more information about the fire at Notre Dame, go ahead and give this a watch. I'm so glad that I got to see it before this happened. And again, it was a remarkable and transcendent experience, which Gothic cathedrals are meant to be. Now, our pieces. Let me scoop myself out of the way here. So, again, Notre Dame is not on our list. But what we do have, we have the Chartres Cathedral. If there was anything even more Gothic than Notre Dame, it's the Chartres Cathedral. So we're going to look at this. We're going to look at a Bible, an illuminated Bible. It's a Bible Moralise, a moralized Bible. We're going to look at a statue of Jesus being held by Mary. This is called a Pietà. And then we're going to be looking at a Jewish text, also done in the Gothic style, but it's a Jewish text, and it is a Haggadah. Okay? So our pieces, I'm going to walk through these with you. I'm just going to talk a little bit about them, but the real bulk of the research is going to come from you watching videos that I'm going to link down below, as well as reading some articles, okay, so that you can get a better sense of what these buildings are about. So the Chartres Cathedral, and you know it's the Chartres Cathedral because it has two separate, like the towers are not symmetrical. You can see that the front of the building was started during the Romanesque because the windows are rounded and small. The tracery, the stonework in the rose window is very thick. And you can see that as we move up, like it gets a lot more ornate. Okay. We've got these attached buttresses, and now around the back, we're going to have those flying buttresses. I have not seen the Chartres Cathedral in person, but I would love to. So here is the portal. So all of these are pieces that, again, the Chartres Cathedral is one of those pieces where AP is sneaky and they give you 6 images associated with it. Unlike the Acropolis, where each of those pieces was something completely different, these are just parts of the building. So we get a front view, a side view, side back view, the portal, the gateway, the doorway. And again, here we get Christ in a mandorla, surrounded by the evangelists. Here in the main, we got the jam statues. We got the archivolts filled with angels. Okay, and there's 3 of them. We've got the interior shot where we have the rib vaults. We've got the clerestory. We've got the triforium. We've got the arcade, the nave, the apse. Look how much glass is there. And the thing about Chartres is that it's one of the cathedrals that has the most original stained glass, which makes it really, really, really special. We get the window of Mary holding the Christ child. Okay. And this is, I think, is this the most? Oh, and the floor plan. Okay. So if you take a look at this, we've got this stained glass window, and the color blue is supposedly from a lost recipe that this only exists here in Chartres, the Chartres blue glass. We've got Mary, we've got angels swinging, censers filled with incense. We've got the dove of the Holy Spirit. Here's Mary crowned. She's wearing her sacre bleu, her holy blue. She's holding the Christ child. And then below are stories from the Bible. Now again, cathedral art is made for people who are illiterate. And so it's telling the story of the Bible, of the life of Christ, of the Virgin, so that you can know these stories without having the advantage of reading. And the floor plan, where we have the nave, the apse, the radiating chapels, the transept, the crossing, the choir, the side aisles, the ambulatory, okay, the westwork, the narthex, all the parts of the cathedral. So go ahead and watch these clips, okay, and these will help round out your knowledge of the Chartres Cathedral, how they're using geometry, how they're using color, and what they're doing on the inside as well as the outside to teach people and to give them the experience of lux nova, this emotional presence of God. Now, our next piece comes from modern-day Germany. Okay, and this is called the Rotgern Pietà. A pietà, lowercase p, is a scene, a statue where a Mary is holding the dead Christ. Okay, now you can see here this wooden statue that it is highly emotional, and that's the point. They want to make you feel something. And here's really, in the Gothic is where they're getting Christ and they're showing him suffering. And you can see here how he's deflated, almost he's emaciated, like his head's too big for it. His neck can't hold the weight of his head because the rest of his body is so emaciated. You can see the wounds, how they've sculpted the blood pouring out of the wounds. And you can see Mary, how she's holding on to him, and she's not even like really looking at him. She's just defeated. Now, this sculpture is meant to be highly emotional, and it's meant to make you feel. And it's meant to say, okay, this is, again, the Gothic is when we get these depictions. Because if we think back to the Romanesque, you got pictures of Christ, and he was depicted in majesty and in power and in judgment, judging the humanity for, the sins of the world. Here, because their lives were so bad, you get a different Christ. You get a Christ who suffers so that he can say, I know how you feel. I felt it too. So it's a thing, it is a tool of empathy, so that you can feel the divine love of God, and that's why they're making the suffering so obvious. Okay? In 21st century America, we look at depictions of Christ suffering and think, oh, that's gross. That's like dark and gruesome. It's not meant to be gruesome. It's meant to show you, no, he gets it. He feels your pain too, because your life is gruesome as well. And that's the point. Okay? So the Rotgan Pietà, again, Pietà is a depiction of Mary holding the dead Christ after his crucifixion. Go ahead and watch the clip as well. Oh gosh, if you see that, look at her face, like her just defeated face. And you can see it better here than you could on the previous image, where her lower lip, and you can almost see it quiver. And her hunched back, like she's just defeated, and she's got nothing left when you've lost everything. And that's what this piece is about. And that's what it's speaking to. Now, a moralized Bible is a Bible that it's not the entire text of the Bible. It's selections from the Bible. And the reason that you're selecting them is to teach a story. So it's all the stories that kind of relate to a theme. All right. Now, this moralized Bible it's about how to be a good ruler. All the stories relate back to how to be a good ruler. And the scenes in this image, now this book they're going to show us from the moralized Bible, two scenes. This is the scene from the Apocalypse. Now the Apocalypse we hear the word and it means end of the world. Actually, the Apocalypse is the Greek word for revelation. It's a Greek word for the last book of the Bible, the uncovering, the revealing, the revelation. But because of the content of the book of Revelation is about the end of the world, we've now appropriated that word and use it to mean the end of the world. But really, apocalypse means revelation. So this is images and text from the book of Revelation in the last book of the Bible. Okay? So go ahead and give these videos a watch. They're going to leaf through the book for you and explain it. And this is the dedication page of the king. Now, this page was added to the Moralized Bible to dedicate it to Louis IX of France, his mother, Blanche of Castile, and the young boy king, Louis IX, okay, and the monks who were creating the book. Now, you can see how the imagery is a little bit more ornate than, think back to the Bayeux tapestry. Think how flattened everything was. Okay, we're still getting that flattening. We're still getting that floating, that full of goldness. We still feel the Byzantine influence. But if you look in the folds of the clothes, now think back to that Bayeux tapestry, how it really is just lines. Here, and the Lindisfarne Gospels also, how they're just using lines. Here they're starting to use color modulation and value shifts. So we're starting to render just the slightest bit more naturally. And that's important, because this is what's going to lead us out of the Gothic and into the Renaissance. Okay. But you can see that there's a heavy use of architectural framing, and that's also a hallmark of the Gothic in illustrations. They use architectural framing to contain the images. All right. We've got these this arcade here. And you can see also there's this patterning in the gold work. There's patterning on the page to make it sparkle, to make it shine. It's kind of like chasing in a piece of jewelry, like the looped fibula, the Merovingian fibula, but this is on a page of parchment, of calf skin. Okay. So you get monks actively in the act of creating the book, just like on in the Lindisfarne Gospels, where you had the Luke page where he was actively writing, and he's got his desk and he's got his stool that he's sitting on, and above them are Blanche of Castile and Louis IX, and they're breaking out of their registers, which is this really cool moment. They're breaking out of their registers here, kind of spilling over into the register below. So go ahead again and give these a watch. It will give you more information. Now, our last piece comes from medieval Spain. All right. Spain in the Gothic era, the Christians are pushing the Muslims out. Spain has been controlled by the Muslims for 1,000 years, not quite, 1,000 years, 800 years, and the Christians are starting to push back, and they're pushing them out. So they're conquering more lands, but in the Muslim-controlled lands here in Spain, Christians and Jews and Muslims are going to live in relative harmony, and they're going to have this really great system set up of mutual respect. Imagine. And so the piece that we're going to be looking at is obviously influenced by what's going on the Gothic period in France. Okay, they're going to look at that style and copy it, but it's for a Jewish text. Now, the book is for the Passover. The Passover is a Jewish holiday that's celebrated in the spring, and it tells the story. You celebrate the redemption of Israel, the freedom of Israel from the Egyptians. So you have Moses, who leads the children of Israel out of Egypt, and the plagues, he brings plagues upon the Egyptians to try and convince them to let the Israelites go, and the last plague being the death of the firstborn. And so what they did was, the story goes, is that they painted lamb's blood on their doorways so that the angel of death would pass them by and know not to enter into the Israelite homes. And so the Passover is literally the passing over of the angel of death, and they're being spared the death of the firstborn. And so Passover, that is a celebration of freedom and independence, and it's one of my favorite holidays. It's just so good. And you celebrate it with food and with song and with readings, and everything's symbolic. It's so good. If you've never had the chance to experience a Passover Seder, Passover meal, and with all of its parts, it's very, very cool. So go ahead and give this video a watch. And this will walk you through what a Passover Seder is and what it looks like. Now, in that video, you'll see that they use a book. There's a book that kind of guides you along through the whole event, through the whole night. And it can last several hours, which is really, really cool. But they use a book to guide you where it has the prayers that you say, and it gives the order, and it has the text that you read, and the musings of the sages and the philosophers about what these different events mean. And that book is called a Haggadah. Now, this book is the Golden Haggadah. This is a very, very richly decorated copy of a Haggadah from Gothic Spain, in which the Jews are, you're meant to use this book during the Passover. So you can tell that this book was not just for casual use, that it was meant for someone who is upper crust, someone who is quite wealthy, who can afford it, and it is just beautiful. So there are 3 pictures associated with the Golden Haggadah that AP wants you to see. There's this page, which is the plagues. So you have death of livestock, you have frogs, you have lice that descend, and I'm not sure. This one looks like so this is supposed to be the king of Egypt. This guy sitting down, and he looks more like the king of France than the king of Egypt, but there we are. The guy standing up is Moses, okay, and he's got his staff, and the king of Egypt is getting, in this one I'm not sure which plague this is supposed to be, because it just looks like wild animals, or like here's a squirrel and here's a bunny and here's a lion, and they're all like kind of attacking him. I'm not sure what plague this is supposed to be honest. But but again, you can see how they relate with the architecture. The architecture is always going to be askew in Gothic illustrations, where it's going to be too small, the people are going to be too big for the buildings. And we saw this earlier. We saw this in the Byzantine. So again, this is a throwback to Byzantine-ness. Look at the gold work again, the chasing work here. It's not chasing because it's on paper, or excuse me, it's on parchment. But you can see that the effect is the same of the indentations in the gold and the parchment, so that it catches your eye and makes it sparkle. This is the preparing for the Passover, where they're going through it. You've got to cleanse your house. You've got to prepare the meal. Okay, and that's what this is. You go through the whole house, and you have a candle. So that's what they're doing. You've got a candle, and you've got a feather, and you're sweeping up. You've got to get rid of all the leaven, all the yeast, anything that's got yeast, any crumbs, anything. You go through the whole house, and you clean out the whole house. And this is the origin of spring cleaning, by the way, is this moment. And you go through and you sweep up, and you look for all the little pieces of crumbs. You got to get rid of all your yeast products, because you have to eat unleavened bread at Passover, because that's what they did. And here's the flight from Egypt, where finally the death of the firstborn happens, and Pharaoh says, "Get out. I don't want you here anymore. Go away." But then he changes his mind and sends his soldiers after them. And Moses parts the Red Sea. And then he, so the Israelites can escape. But then he closes it again. And the ocean, the sea drowns the Egyptians. So these are the scenes that they want you to see. Okay. Now, down below, there is the link for, again, the British Library, which owns this piece, and they have, you can scroll through the pages. Please take that opportunity. Now, this book, you'll notice you flip through the book right to left, because it is written in Hebrew, which is read right to left. And so a Hebrew book is going to be read from the back cover to the front. So you can start at what we would call the back, they would call the front. You start it here and read it this way, right to left. Okay, so that's how you have to open and flip through the book in the British Library. So go ahead and give that a view, okay? You do have an article that I will link, so please read that and take your notes, okay? So these are our pieces. I want you to very seriously go through these video clips, watch them, take notes on them, and enjoy them. These are some of the best pieces we're going to see all year. They're just absolutely fantastic. And I want you to get a real sense of what they are about, what they're trying to accomplish. Okay? Until next time, have a great night.